The first thing Arya noticed was the sound of the fortress breathing above her. Stone did not have lungs, but tonight it seemed to inhale and exhale with the pack, every rumble of boots and clash of steel traveling down through the bones of the mountain and into the old infirmary where she sat alone. The ceiling shivered with distant growls. Dust drifted in thin, lazy threads from between the ancient stones, floating through the cold torchlight like tired ghosts that had nowhere else to go. She sat on the narrow stone bench, thin hands locked together so tightly her knuckles had turned white, but she did not even feel the pain. Her fingers were numb, her arms were numb, the tip of her nose burned with the cold. The walls sweated around her, damp and dark, and every small sound bounced around the corridor like it was afraid of dying in the silence. Drips from the ceiling tapped against the floor, slow and steady, like a heartbeat that did not belong to her. Her own heart raced faster than that quiet drip. It beat against her ribs as if it wanted to run, as if it already knew something very bad waited for her outside the cell bars. She swallowed and the sound echoed in her ears, loud, too loud in the emptiness. Her breath came out in white clouds, thin as smoke, which disappeared almost as soon as they left her lips. It felt like the fortress was swallowing even that. Far above, the war horns called again. The sound rolled down through the stone like thunder trapped in narrow halls. The first blast was long and low, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The second cut through the air sharp as a blade. The third was the worst, short, broken, like a shout strangled halfway through. Each horn meant the same thing: rogues were near, or already at the walls. Each horn meant blood. Arya had grown up listening to horns in the distance, never this close, never this loud. Before tonight, she had heard them as something far away, like a storm on the horizon that might pass her by if she stayed very still and very small. Now they sounded right above her head, as if the storm had finally found her hiding place and decided it had waited long enough. She closed her eyes for a moment, just to see if the darkness behind her lids was softer than the darkness of the cell. It was not. It felt the same, heavy, thick, pressing down on her from all sides. But she kept them shut anyway, because when she closed her eyes she could pretend she was somewhere else. She could pretend she was back in the little hut on the edge of the forest, with bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling and a fire crackling low in the corner. She could pretend she could still smell the sharp tang of pine resin and sage, not the sour mix of damp stone and old blood. She could pretend that when someone shouted her name, it was only one of the old herbalists calling her to help grind roots or mix salves, not a guard dragging her through corridors with iron on her wrists. Her name had never sounded right in the fortress. It had always felt too soft for these hard walls, too quiet for these loud people who moved as one, who thought as one, who never let anyone forget who belonged and who did not. She had never belonged. She did not remember the faces of the parents who had left her, only the story the herbalists told her when she was old enough to understand words like abandoned and unwanted. They said she had been found at the edge of a burned camp, wrapped in a scrap of cloth that still smelled of smoke. No pack marks. No family token. Nothing to prove she belonged to anyone. Just a baby with a loud cry and eyes that would not close, even when the world around her was burning. The herbalists had taken her in because they took in broken things. Broken herbs, broken animals, broken children. They taught her how to listen to what plants whispered when the wind leaned close. They taught her how to see the faint color in a fevered cheek and know if the body underneath was losing or winning the fight. They taught her that gentle hands could hold more power than sharp claws. But they could not teach her how to belong to a pack that never claimed her. Even when the fortress finally opened its gates to her as an Omega healer, even when they allowed her to wear their colors at the edge of her cloak, they did not let her forget the word that followed her everywhere: outsider. She heard it in the way they spoke to her. She felt it in the way they watched her. Nothing she did ever fully washed it away. Now, in the cold cell beneath their feet, she felt that word wrapping around her throat again. Outsider. Easier to blame. Easier to throw away. The war horns called a fourth time, shorter, sharper, desperate. The sound clawed through her chest and left her heart beating even faster. She pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum as if she could press the fear back down, keep it from rising any higher. If she let it rise, it would choke her. If she let it spill out, it would drown her. They think you helped them, one of the guards had said when they pushed her into the cell. They think you let the rogues in. They. As if they were a single beast with one mind, one voice, one judgment. She had not answered. She had not known what to say. There were no words she could imagine that would make a difference. The rogues had attacked the outer patrol. Wolves were dead. Another healer had not returned. Somehow, that had turned into whispers. Arya was seen near the border. Arya helped them. Arya knows too much about wounds that are not ours. Arya, who could not even remember being chosen by anyone, now accused of choosing the enemy. Her chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. She let her eyes open again, because the darkness in the cell, at least, was real. The walls were old stone, fitted together by hands that had long since turned to dust. The torches were set into iron brackets, flames shuddering whenever a draft slipped through the cracks. The floor was uneven, worn down by years of boots and bare feet pacing the same paths again and again. From where she sat, she could see the end of the passage, where it curved left and vanished, taking the light with it. Beyond that bend lay the stair that led up to the fortress proper, to the judgment hall, to the place where leaders sat and decided who lived and who did not. Footsteps echoed faintly from somewhere above, fast and heavy. Orders were shouted. She could not make out the words, only the tone, urgent, rough, tired. The war with the rogues had gone on too long. Everyone moved like stretched rope, pulled just a little tighter every day. Sooner or later, something would snap. Arya wondered if she was meant to be that something. The air in the cell block was colder than it had any right to be. The fortress was carved into the mountain, yes, but even stone should remember warmth when so many bodies moved above. Down here, though, the cold felt old and stubborn, like it had been waiting for years and was not ready to leave. It seeped into her bare ankles where her skirt did not reach. It climbed her spine one slow inch at a time. Her hands trembled. She stared at them, at the small scars across her fingers from knife slips and thorn pricks, at the faint green stain that never quite left her nails no matter how hard she scrubbed. Healer's hands. She had always liked them, even when others did not look twice. They were proof that she could fix things. Proof that she could help. Now those same hands lay useless in her lap. No herbs. No bandages. No wounded to tend. Only herself, and even she did not know how to heal what waited above. The fortress groaned again, another horn blast booming through the floor. A shout, closer now, followed by the clatter of weapons. Her body flinched before she could stop it. Her shoulders jerked up. She held her breath without meaning to. Her ears strained to catch every small sound. For a moment, all she heard was the drip, drip, drip of water. Then came the footsteps. They started as a faint, distant tremor above her head, barely different from the usual movements of soldiers. But as seconds passed, the sound grew clearer. Measured. Heavy. Not the scattered rhythm of a patrol. This was different. This was someone important, someone used to others moving out of their way without being told. Leather soles on stone. Hard. Sure. Not hurried like the other feet racing to the walls. Her heart jumped into her throat. He would come. Of course he would come. The pack could not afford to ignore a traitor in the middle of a war. They would want answers, even if they had already decided they did not believe them. They would want to look her in the eye when they passed judgment, if only to ease their own guilt later when they told themselves they had done what they had to do. She pressed her back against the wall until the cold dug straight through her cloak. Her spine ached, but she did not move. If she stayed very still, maybe her hands would stop shaking. Maybe her voice would not break when she spoke. If she spoke. If they let her say anything at all. The footsteps climbed down the stair. One set. Slow, heavy. Another, smaller, lighter, following a half-beat behind. Armor shifted with the movement. Fabric whispered against stone. Somewhere above, a hinge creaked as a door opened, then slammed shut. The sound echoed down, 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 bouncing off the walls until it felt like it was inside her skull. The torch closest to her guttered and flared as a draft pushed through the corridor. The flame bent toward the stair, as if it, too, was bowing to whoever approached. Aria's mouth went dry. She wet her lips with the tip of her tongue, but the dryness did not fade. She tried to swallow and her throat refused at first. She forced it, feeling the lump of fear slide down like a stone. The horns fell silent at last. For the first time in several minutes, the fortress did not roar or call. The quiet that followed was worse than the noise. It was the kind of silence that meant everyone was waiting, holding their breath at the same time. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stair. They turned the corner, entering the corridor that led to her cell. The sound of them on the floor was sharper now, closer. Her pulse drummed so loudly in her ears it almost drowned out the noise. Almost. She did not need to see him to know who had come. She had only seen Alpha Kale up close once, when he stood over a dying warrior on a battlefield and let Arya kneel beside the body to do her work. That night, the moon had hung low and full over the ruined field, painting everything silver and sharp. His shadow had fallen across her hands as she pressed cloth to a wound she knew she could not close. He had not spoken to her. He had not needed to. His presence had been its own language, commanding, heavy, full of a grief he did not bother to hide. Now, that same presence moved toward her, step by step. The torches along the corridor caught the shape of him first. The light crawled up his boots, over his dark trousers, along the long coat whose edges brushed against his legs as he walked. His shoulders were broad, the line of his body straight and hard, as if he had been carved from stone like the walls around him. Scars crossed his hands where they gripped the hilt of the weapon at his side. His jaw was set so tight she could see the muscle tick. His eyes, when they found her through the bars, were not the bright, easy color of a summer sky. They were darker. Wilder. The kind of color that remembered too many winters. Behind him, a smaller figure emerged from the shadows. Prince Rowan moved like a shadow that had learned how to carry a knife. He was small, only 7, but there was nothing soft about the way he held himself. Legs planted just a little apart, as if he expected the floor to shift under him at any moment. Shoulders squared, but not relaxed. Every line of his body said one thing, ready. He did not cling to his father, did not hide behind his coat. He stood a step back into the side, where he could see both Kale and Arya without turning his head. His eyes were the same dark shade as his father's, but where Kale's held a storm of old hurt and duty, Rowan's were quieter and sharper, like knives buried in snow. In his right hand, he gripped a dagger carved from wolf bone. The bone was polished smooth from touch, the curved blade catching the torchlight and sending it skittering along the walls in thin, pale flashes. His fingers were locked so tight around the handle that his knuckles stood out like small stones under his skin. He held it not like a toy, not like a child trying to be brave, but like someone who had already used it and knew he might need to use it again. The stories about him had spread through the fortress faster than smoke. 7 years old and already more dangerous than most grown wolves. A prince with a broken voice and broken trust. A child who had not spoken a single word since the night his mother vanished, leaving behind only her blood and a house full of broken things. Every woman who had tried to approach him with kind hands and soft smiles had left with scratches on their arms or teeth marks on their skin. Some had left with more than that. He did not scream when he attacked. He did not cry. He did not shout. He simply moved, fast and silent, like a small storm that refused to be touched. Now those same eyes, cold and mute, fixed on Arya as if she were something dirty at the bottom of a boot. She felt his gaze like a weight on her chest. She lowered her own eyes to the floor for just a second, not in shame, but to stop herself from flinching. She could face war wounds and screaming soldiers. She could face fevers and deathbeds. She had never learned how to face that kind of hatred from a child. The corridor narrowed around them, or maybe it only felt that way. The torches hissed softly, the only sound besides the slow breathing of three people who had never wanted to meet like this. Alpha Kale stopped in front of her cell. Up close, the scars across his face were more visible than she remembered. One cut from his left brow down to the edge of his cheek, missing his eye by a breath. Another split his bottom lip, healed into a pale line that disappeared into his beard. He carried his grief the way he carried his weapons, openly, without apology. He did not speak right away. For a long moment, he only watched her. His gaze moved from her face to her hands, to the iron band around her wrist where the chain connected to the wall, then back to her face again. Each pass felt like another judgment being written and sealed. His expression did not change, but the silence between them thickened. Arya forced herself to meet his eyes. If she looked away now, she knew it would be taken as guilt. Her chest burned with the effort, but she kept her chin up, only a little, just enough to show she still had something left that was hers alone. Rowan shifted behind his father, just a fraction, enough to change the angle of the dagger in his hand. The bone blade pointed more toward her now, as if pulled by some invisible string. His bare feet made no sound on the stone. His face stayed unreadable, not angry, not sad, just closed. Locked from the inside. The fortress above them roared again as warriors shouted new orders, but down here the world had shrunk to 3 hearts and 4 walls. Arya heard her own voice in her head before it reached her lips, asking the question that had curled in her chest since the guards slammed the cell door. Why am I here? Why am I the one you chose to blame? The words tasted of smoke and old hurt. She swallowed them back. She knew better than to speak first. If she had learned anything in this fortress, it was that Omegas did not lead conversations with Alphas. Not if they wanted to keep their tongues. Kale took one step closer to the bars. He did not lean on them. He did not reach through. He simply moved nearer, close enough now that she could see the tired shadows under his eyes and the faint dust caught in his dark hair. The smell of cold air and iron clung to him, mixed with something deeper, older, wolf and forest and battlefields that never fully washed away. Rowan followed that step like a small echo, still silent, still watching her as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered for these few heartbeats. Arya's pulse pounded so loudly it hurt. It struck her in that moment, not as a thought, but as a sharp, physical truth, that whatever happened next would decide everything. Whether she ever saw the sky again. Whether she went back to herbs and bandages, or up the steps to the judgment hall and beyond. Whether this pack remained something she stayed on the edge of, or something that crushed her for good. Alone in the old stone infirmary beneath the fortress, with the war horns quiet and the cold pressing in, Arya finally understood that the real storm was not the rogues at the gates. It was this, the Alpha with his grief, the prince with his silent knife, and the traitor they believed they had found in her. The storm outside the fortress was loud, but the storm inside that narrow cell was louder. Kale's voice came out low and rough, like stones grinding together. His words asked about borders, about rogues, about meetings in the dark. His eyes asked something else: why should I let you live? Arya answered as clearly as she could, even though her tongue felt thick and her throat burned. She spoke of herbs by the riverbank, of gathering roots under the watch of a patrol, of treating wounded wolves who had never bothered to thank her. She did not beg. She did not cry. She tried to make her voice steady, as if steady words could build a bridge over the deep hole opening between them. He watched her without blinking, listening, but his jaw stayed tight. Every time she said, "I did not," the air grew colder. Every time she said, "I swear," the chain at her wrist felt heavier. Then Rowan moved. He took half a step closer to the bars, small feet silent on the stone. The wolf bone dagger lifted a little, the tip pointing straight at Arya's chest. His hand did not shake. His face did not twist. His eyes, dark and flat, stared at her like she was something dangerous and disgusting at the same time. Arya's breath hitched. Most children moved with noise. Little sounds. Shifts of cloth. Nervous coughing. Rowan did not. He was like a shadow that had learned the weight of metal and the taste of blood too early. He sniffed. It was not a big, obvious sniff. Just a small, sharp pull of air through his nose, like his wolf was reaching out from inside his small chest. His nostrils flared. His head tilted the tiniest bit to the side. The dagger dipped, then rose again, closer now, close enough that if the bars were not there, the blade could have pressed against the thin fabric of her dress. Cale's eyes flicked toward his son, just for a heartbeat. The alpha did not speak, did not stop him. He watched, waiting, as if this, too, was part of the test. Rowan sniffed again. His eyes narrowed. His gaze locked on Arya's throat, where her pulse hammered under her skin. His fingers tightened around the bone handle until the edge dug into his palm. A thin line of red rose there, bright against his pale hand, but he did not seem to feel it. Arya knew the way wolves used scent. She had seen warriors catch the smell of fear on an enemy and smile. She had seen healers breathe in the scent of infection, of poison, of rot, and know exactly where to cut and where to poultice. She knew right now that the prince was smelling more than just fear and damp stone. He was smelling her. Her herbs, her sweat, her worry, her old life clinging to her like smoke. The dagger crept closer, the tip now nearly touching the iron bar between them. Rowan's eyes lifted to her face. In them, something flickered, a flash of anger, a flash of hurt, gone before she could name it. Arya's heartbeat stuttered. Her whole body rang with one clear, sharp thought: he could slip that blade through the bars fast enough to cut my throat before anyone stopped him. She saw it, the quick thrust, the burst of pain, the sudden warmth. She saw Cale's hand too slow to catch his son's wrist in time. She saw the guards above them saying later that it was an accident, a tragedy, one more sad story in a fortress full of ghosts. Her skin went cold. Her fear rose high, trying to choke her. And then, without planning it, without thinking at all, her mouth opened and a sound slipped out. It was soft, almost too soft to hear over the crackle of the torch. Just a few notes, hummed on a breath. A tiny melody, old as the forest, shaped into a whisper. It was a chant the herbalists had taught her long ago, when her hands were too small to carry buckets of water without spilling. They had hummed it when they crushed leaves, when they ground roots, when they stitched torn skin in tiny, careful lines. A tune for steady hands and calm hearts. A tune for pushing fear away long enough to do what needed to be done. The sound left her lips without words, just the gentle rise and fall of the notes, light and simple like a stream running over small stones. Rowan froze. His arm jerked as if someone had grabbed his wrist, even though no one touched him. The dagger stopped, suspended between them. His eyes went wide for the first time since he entered the cell block, shock cracking through the cold mask on his face. His breath caught in his chest with a soft, broken sound. He trembled. It was not a big, shaking tremor like a sobbing child. It was smaller, tighter, trapped under his skin. His shoulders stiffened. His fingers twitched around the dagger. His whole body looked like a bowstring pulled too far back, about to snap. The air in the corridor changed. Cale's head turned sharply toward his son then, the first real break in his composure since he arrived. His hand moved away from his weapon and hovered near Rowan's shoulder, not quite touching. His eyes, which had been hard and distant when fixed on Arya, now burned with something raw and worried. "Rowan," he said, voice quieter, rougher. The boy did not look at him. His gaze stayed locked on Arya, on her lips, on the place where the sound had come from. The dagger dipped a little, then lifted again as if pulled by two different commands at once. His throat worked. No words came out. Only air, leaving him in a shiver. Arya's own breath came fast now, fogging the air between the bars. She felt the urge to stop, to cut the chant off, afraid she had broken some rule she did not know. But the look on the boy's face held her in place. He looked lost. Not angry. Not hateful. Lost, like someone who suddenly found a door they thought had been locked forever and did not know what waited on the other side. She kept humming. The notes slid out, smooth and quiet, filling the small space around them. The old words stayed in her head, unspoken, but the melody carried the memory all the same. She remembered sitting on a dirt floor while an old woman with shaking hands pressed warm fingers to her forehead and hummed the same tune until Arya's fear faded. Rowan's free hand rose slowly, as if pulled by the sound. It hovered near his chest, fingers curling against his shirt right over his heart. His eyes glistened. Not with full tears, not yet, but with a shine that had nothing to do with the torchlight. The small scar along his jaw, half hidden by baby fat, stood out white against his flushed skin. His lips parted just a little. A tiny sound slipped out of him, a breath shaped like the beginning of a word. Chaol went still. The Alpha looked at his son as if someone had cut open the sky. For a heartbeat, all his anger, all his suspicion, all his hardened strength fell away. Underneath, Arya saw only a father who had waited years to hear his child speak and had instead watched him turn silent and sharp, hurting anyone who came close. Rowan, he tried again, gently this time, no order, only the name. The boy's eyes flicked toward his father, then back to Arya, torn between two anchors. The dagger lowered an inch. His knuckles stayed white. His breathing came fast and shallow, matching Arya's in a strange, tangled rhythm. The melody trembled on Arya's tongue, but she did not let it break. She did not know why the chant mattered to him. She did not know why his body shook like that, why his gaze burned like a trapped animal catching a scent it remembered from before the cage. All she knew was that something inside him knew this song. His mother. The thought came sharp and clear. His mother sang this. It fit too neatly, the way his trembling turned to a quiet, broken stillness when she reached the oldest part of the tune, the way his eyes turned wet but no tears fell, the way his lips moved as if caught between wanting to echo the notes and being afraid to. For the first time, Arya did not see just the stories whispered in the halls: prince, savage, woman-hater, broken boy. She saw a child who had had a voice once, who had a mother who hummed while she mixed herbs, who had lost both suddenly in a night of blood and shouting. A child whose world had cracked so hard that even his words had fallen through the gaps. The last note of the chant left her mouth and floated away into the cold air. Silence crashed in behind it. Rowan stood there, breathing hard, eyes wide, chest heaving. His dagger arm had dropped all the way now, the tip of the bone blade pointing at the floor. His grip had loosened just enough that it could have slipped from his fingers if he let it. His hand on his chest stayed pressed over his heart like he was trying to hold something inside that wanted to burst out. His lips parted again. A tiny sound came, softer than a whisper, just one broken, half-formed note. Chaol heard it. Arya saw the way his whole body flinched, as if someone had stabbed him straight through the armor. His hand finally settled on his son's shoulder, fingers curling around the small curve with careful strength. Rowan jerked at the touch but did not pull away. He stared at Arya like she had done something impossible. Like she had reached across the bars and the chains and the years of silence and touched a wound no one else could find. Fear twisted inside her again, but now it mixed with something else, an ache she did not have a name for. It hurt worse than the fear. It hurt in a way that made her want to step closer, to reach out, even though she knew better. She stayed where she was, back against the cold wall, hands in her lap, iron biting her wrist. Chaol's gaze tore away from his son and landed on her again. This time there was something new in it. The suspicion was still there, hard and sharp. The grief too. But under it, faint and dark, flickered a different light, the dangerous spark of hope. "What did you sing?" he asked, voice tight, as if the words scraped his throat on the way out. Arya swallowed. "An old herbal chant," she said softly. "From those who raised me. For steady hands. For calm." "Where did you learn it?" His tone held no softness now, only demand. "In the herbalist's hut beyond the eastern woods," she answered. "They said their mothers sang it. And their mothers before them. I never knew where it started." Chaol's jaw clenched. Rowan made another small sound, a breathy hitch, and leaned almost imperceptibly into his father's hand. The prince's eyes never left Arya's face. His lips moved, and this time she saw it clearly. He was shaping a word he could not bring himself to push out. Mother. He did not say it. His throat closed on it. But his whole body screamed it without sound. Cale saw it too. His hand tightened on Rowan's shoulder, steadying him, steadying himself. Her, he said at last, the single word dropping into the cold air like a stone into deep water. Arya's stomach flipped. He could have called for the guards. He could have raised his hand and ended this right here. Instead, he stepped back from the bars and turned slightly, placing his body between Rowan and the cell as if suddenly he was not sure which one of them needed protecting. He looked at his son. Come, he said. We're done here. Rowan did not move. His fingers curled tighter over his chest. His other hand, the one with the dagger, shook now in tiny, sharp jerks. He stared at Arya with a fierce, confused desperation that burned hotter than hate. Cale followed his gaze and understood. The decision he made then showed in the way his shoulders lowered just a fraction, in the way his eyes hardened with something like grim acceptance. He turned back to Arya. You are not cleared, he said. You are not forgiven. You are not free. Each word landed heavy. But whatever you did or did not do for the rogues, you have just done something to my son. Arya's mouth opened, but no sound came. You will come up from this hole, Cale continued. Not as a healer. Not as a pack member. His eyes cut down to the chain at her wrist. As a captive. Her pulse stumbled. You will stay where I tell you, he said. You will wear iron. You will not cross the lines marked for you. You will not touch him unless ordered. You will not speak to him unless spoken to. And if you try to run, if you try to harm him, if this is some trick. He did not finish the threat. He did not need to. The cold promise in his stare said enough. Arya's tongue finally loosened. Why, she whispered, the single word raw. Cale's gaze flicked to his son, then back. Because you woke something in him, he said. For 3 years, nothing did. Not medicine. Not discipline. Not comfort. His voice roughened. One sound from you, and he shakes. Rowan took a small, unsteady step toward the bars, almost in protest, as if the thought of leaving her here now scratched at him from the inside. The dagger lowered further, his arm hanging limp at his side. Arya's heart clenched. She had not asked for this. She had not asked to matter to anyone in this fortress, especially not its most broken prince. But the truth was there, hanging in the damp air. Something tied them now, thin and fragile as a spiderweb, but they're all the same. The guards arrived with the clatter of keys and the stink of sweat and metal. Word traveled fast in a fortress. Faster than horses. Faster than war horns. By the time they unlocked her cell, voices were already rising up above, female voices, sharp and angry, tossed down the stairwell like stones. She's a criminal. She helped the rogues. You can't put her near the prince, he'll rip her throat out. He's hurt every woman who's stepped near him. Let him at her and be done with it. The words hit Arya like slaps, but they did not surprise her. This was the pack she had always known, quick to fear, quick to anger, quicker still to turn both on someone who stood alone. The guard snapped an iron cuff around her free wrist, then another, linking them together with a short length of chain that forced her hands close to her body. The metal burned cold against her skin, colder even than the walls. Iron had a way of sinking into a shifter's bones, even an Omega's. It made the wolf under the skin curl up and whine. Arya felt hers shrink back, small and tired, pressing itself into the deepest, darkest corner inside her. For a second she could hardly breathe. The weight of the iron was not much, but it felt like the world had settled on her shoulders. Up, the guard grunted. She stood on stiff legs. Pins and needles shot up through her calves from sitting too long on stone. She nearly stumbled, but caught herself on the wall with her shoulder. The chain between her wrists jingled softly, a cruel, light sound. Cale stepped aside to let her pass, but his eyes never left her. Rowan moved with him, always keeping a clear line of sight on Arya, as if afraid she would vanish the moment he blinked. They walked up the corridor, past the flaring torches. Up the narrow stone stair that carved its way into the belly of the fortress. The air warmed with each step, carrying with it the smells of wood smoke, sweat, and too many bodies stuck in one place for too long. Her lungs ached with the climb, the iron, the tightness in her chest. When they reached the main level, the sound hit her first. A wall of voices, layered and tangled, warriors calling orders, children crying, doors slamming, feet pounding across the courtyard. The war horns might have fallen silent, but the fortress was very much awake and afraid. As Cale led them through the tunnel toward the central hall, wolves turned to stare. Women in thick cloaks. Men with bandaged arms. Old omegas clutching baskets. Young soldiers with blood on their boots. Their eyes slid past Cale with the respect and distance given to an alpha. Their eyes stuck on Arya with something else, suspicion, hatred, barely hidden hunger for someone to blame. "She's the one," someone hissed. "Traitor," another spat under their breath. A young female near the wall pressed a hand to her mouth. "They're taking her to him," she whispered to her friend. "He'll kill her. You've seen what he does. He'll." Her voice dropped, but the meaning did not. Arya kept her gaze straight ahead. The iron cuffs grew heavier with every step. She imagined lines on the floor already waiting for her, painted or carved, marking the edges of a cage she could not see yet. Rowan walked just behind his father's left shoulder now, close enough that his small hand brushed the edge of Cale's coat. The dagger was still in his grip, but his knuckles were less white now. He stared at Arya's back, at the way the chain between her wrists swayed with her steps. He did not know what to do with the feeling curled up in his chest. It burned. It scared him. It felt like the nights when he woke up with his blanket wet from tears he did not remember shedding, his throat aching from screams he never let out. But there was something new in it too, something that reached, that leaned forward instead of away. He did not have words for any of it. So he watched her. Cale felt his son's eyes on the Omega and set his jaw harder. He was not a fool. He knew danger when he saw it. A woman from nowhere who sang his dead mate's song and made his silent son shake was danger in its purest form. Every instinct in him screamed to lock her away deeper, to throw her to the rogues, to cut the thin, strange thread tying them together before it pulled any tighter. But another part of him, the part that had sat awake every night for 3 years listening for any sound from his child's room, refused to ignore what he had witnessed in that cell. For the first time since his mate's blood stained the stones, Rowan had reacted to something that was not violence. That was enough to chain the Alpha's fear to his duty and drag it along behind him. They reached the door to the prince's chambers. It was heavy oak, carved with old pack symbols, wolves running, moons waxing and waning, trees with roots that dug deep into unseen earth. Guards stood on either side, straight and tense, eyes widening when they saw Arya in irons behind their leader. "Alpha," one started, unsure. Cale's look silenced him. "Clear the inner hall," he ordered. "No one enters without my word. If anyone crosses the threshold, they answer to me." The guards swallowed and nodded quickly. The door creaked open. Warmth rolled out, carrying the faint smells of parchment, wolf fur, and stale food. This was not a child's room full of toys and bright colors. It was a mix of things that did not know how to belong together anymore, a training mat worn thin in the corner, a small bed with sheets tangled from restless sleep, shelves stacked with old books his mother once read to him, one broken wooden horse lying on its side near the wall, forgotten. Cale stepped in first. Rowan slipped past him, quick and quiet, moving straight to the middle of the room where the rug met bare stone. He turned there to face Arya as she entered. The guards behind them set the rules in place without words. A faint line had been scratched into the floor in a rough circle near the bed, barely visible, but there. The mark of her future cage. The line she would not be allowed to cross. Someone had done it fast, but with enough force that the stone still showed it. Kale pointed to it. You stay inside that ring, he said to Arya. You sleep there. You eat there. You wait there until I say otherwise. Her eyes traced the circle. It was not large. She could sit, stand, maybe take 2 steps in any direction. That was all. Her wolf pressed tighter into the dark, whimpering. She lifted her cuffed hands a little, chains clinking softly. And if he, her gaze flicked to Rowan. If he comes to you, Kale said, you do nothing unless I am here. His voice left no space for argument. You will not call him. You will not sing unless I say. Rowan's fingers curled at his sides at that, a small protest his father did not miss. Kale glanced at him, and for a second their eyes met, Alpha and Prince, father and son. So much unsaid passed between them that Arya felt it in her bones. His decision chained all 3 of them in that moment. He stepped back toward the door, watching them both, his voice dropping lower. You are here because of him, he said to Arya. Not instead of chains. In addition to them. She nodded once. She did not trust her voice to stay steady if she replied. The door thudded shut behind him as he stepped out to post his orders. Inside the room, the air changed again. Rowan and Arya faced each other, a circle of scratched stone and iron between them, a broken song and a shared ghost hanging in the quiet. He still held the dagger, but his grip had loosened. He stared at her with that same intense, searching look, as if trying to see the song on her skin, in her eyes, inside her chest. Arya's heart pounded. Her wrists ached. Her throat still remembered the shape of the chant, even as she bit back the urge to hum it again. She did not speak. He could not. But the strand between them, thin and strange and new, held steady, humming under the surface like a note that had not yet been given a name. Night in the fortress pressed in heavy, even when the moon climbed high outside. Hours passed in the prince's room. The sounds of war and worry in the halls slowly thinned, leaving only distant murmurs and the soft creak of wood as the fortress settled. Arya sat inside the scratched circle on the floor, back against the cold wall, iron cuffs resting in her lap. The chain between her wrists lay in a loose curve over her skirt. Her hands ached, but she could not tell if it was from the metal or from the way she kept them still and folded, as if any movement might break the fragile quiet. Rowan lay in his small bed across the room, blanket pulled up to his chin. His eyes had stayed open long after Kale left, staring at the ceiling, unblinking, like he expected it to fall on him. He had not made a sound. He only watched the shadows on the stones while Arya tried not to stare back. Slowly, his breathing settled into an uneven rhythm, somewhere between wake and sleep. The fire in the small hearth crackled now and then, low and tired. A log shifted, sending a spray of sparks up the chimney. The room smelled faintly of old ash, wolf fur, and the sharp tang of iron from her cuffs. Outside the door, guards shifted their weight but spoke in low voices, their words too blurred to catch. Arya's eyes burned with that heavy, sandy feeling that meant her body wanted sleep, but her thoughts paced circles inside her skull. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cell, the dagger, Rowan's trembling hand on his chest. She heard the small, broken sound he had made when she sang. She saw, again and again, the way Kale's face had changed when his son reacted. A captive, she reminded herself, looking down at the dark bruises blooming under the metal. Not a healer. Not a guest. A captive wrapped in the thin hope of a boy's breath. She leaned her head back against the wall and listened to Rowan breathe. For a while, the sound stayed slow, if uneven. Then, drop by drop, it changed. He started to breathe faster, small quick pulls of air. His fingers gripped the blanket tighter. His legs kicked once, twice, as if running from something only he could see. A low sound slipped from his mouth, almost too soft to hear. Arya's spine went stiff. She knew that sound. She had heard it in healers' tents and sick rooms, in beds where children tried to be brave and failed. It was the sound of a mind falling back into a place it did not want to visit again. Rowan whimpered. The little noise cut through the quiet like a crack in glass. His face, half lit by the faint fire, twisted. His lips pulled back from his teeth in a silent snarl at something in his dreams. His hands clawed at the blanket, twisting it, wrinkling it around his small body. His body tensed. The air temperature shifted around him, a strange wave of heat and chill at once. His back arched off the bed for a heartbeat, then slammed down again. A sharp breath burst from his chest, more like a growl than a cry. Aria's own heartbeat sped up. Her wolf stirred, uneasy, pressing against the inside of her ribs. Rowan's whimper snapped into a scream. It tore out of him raw and wild, ripped from a place that had been locked up tight for years. The sound was not a clear cry like other children made. It was broken, jagged, catching on his throat as if it had forgotten how to come out. It shook his whole body. His eyes flew open, but they did not see the room. They saw something else, fires, blood, shadows with teeth. The change started in his hands. His fingers curled, nails lengthening in an instant into sharp, curved claws that dug into the blanket, tearing it. The veins in his wrists stood out. The tendons under his skin pulled tight like strings. His eyes, once dark, flared with a bright, unnatural glow, gold burning out from the center like a rising sun trapped in storm clouds. His teeth lengthened, sharpening, pressing against his lips. But the change stopped there. His body shook as if something inside him tried to push the shift further, longer limbs, broader bones, full wolf rising, but hit a wall and could not break through. Muscles bunched under his small skin. His jaw clenched so tight it seemed it might crack. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He was trapped halfway, human and wolf fighting for space in too small a body. He screamed again. This time the sound held a rough, almost howling edge. His back bowed. One small foot slammed against the bed frame, making the wood jump. The air around him felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Aria's chain rattled as her arms flinched. Every instinct in her screamed, go to him, hold him down so he does not hurt himself, check his breath, cool his skin, speak his name until he hears it. But the scratched line on the floor held her in place. Kale's voice echoed in her memory, you do nothing unless I am here. Her hands tightened into fists until her nails bit her palms. Rowan's eyes, glowing bright now, snapped toward her. He did not see her at first. He saw something else, smoke, teeth, a door slamming shut. His chest heaved, breaths wild and uneven. Claws tore new lines into the blanket. The wolf in him clawed at his bones, desperate to burst out, to run, to bite. The boy in him fought just as hard to stay small, to stay in this room, to not see again what he saw that night. He choked on his own scream. The sound went high, then broke, leaving his face twisted, mouth open, air scraping in and out without words. Fear, rage, grief, and confusion all tangled inside him, too big, too much for one small chest. Arya knew that look too. She had seen it in warriors after battle, in survivors who sat with glassy eyes because their minds were still on the field. She had seen it in her own reflection once, as a child, when she heard for the first time that her parents had walked away and never came back. He was still screaming, even in the silence. Her throat hurt. Very softly, almost to herself, she hummed one note. It slid out before she could stop it. Just one simple sound, barely more than a breath. It floated across the room, thin but clear, not loud enough to drown out his nightmare but sharp enough to prick it. Rowan's head jerked. His glowing eyes snapped fully to her now, not through her. The wolf in them flared, then flickered, confused. His body still trembled, halfway shifted, claws dug into fabric, teeth too sharp for his mouth. But his focus landed on the source of the sound. Arya drew another note. Then another. The old herbal lullaby rose slowly in the air, the same chant she had used in the cell, but softer, stretched into a gentler shape. She stayed seated. She did not reach for him. She did not break the circle line. Her hands lay open on her lap, palms up, as if she was offering the sound instead of her touch. The melody moved in simple rises and falls, like the sway of branches in a quiet wind, like the lap of water against river stones. No words. Only the tune. Her voice was low, almost a murmur, each note steadier than her breath. Rowan's scream cracked and fell. The next breath he dragged and hitched on a sob that never fully formed. His eyes stayed bright, but the wildness in them shifted. It was still intense, but not pointed outward like a blade now. It turned inward, listening. Claws stayed out, but they stopped tearing. His shoulders shook. The tight curl of his muscles eased just a fraction. His gaze did not leave Arya's face. His ears, small and human still, tilted forward as if trying to catch every thread of the sound. The fire popped in the hearth, but he did not flinch at it. His whole world narrowed to her and the song. In his chest, the wolf pushed hard, wanting to break free from the terror. But the melody wove around that push like gentle hands, not forcing it down, not letting it explode, just holding it. The boy in him reached for it without knowing what he was doing. His glowing eyes blinked once, slow. The light dimmed a shade. Arya's heart thudded with every note. Her throat burned. Her wrists ached under the iron. But she did not stop. She let the song do what it had always done for her, make the fear smaller, not gone, but small enough that breath could find space again. Rowan's breathing began to match the rhythm of the chant. In on one phrase, out on the next. Shaky at first, then more even. His chest still rose fast, but the desperate edge faded. His claws loosened from the blanket, though they did not fully retract. The light in his eyes flickered again, then dimmed further, shrinking back to a deep, steady glow instead of a blinding flare. He swallowed hard. A small sound escaped him, a hoarse, broken exhale. Not a word. Not yet. But less a scream and more a release. He sat up slowly, as if fighting through thick water. The blanket slid off his shoulders. His hair stuck up in wild tufts from sweat. His nightshirt clung to his back. His bare feet found the floor, toes curling against the cold stone. For a second he swayed, caught between lying back down and bolting for the door. Arya kept singing. Her hands lifted, just slightly, palms still open, resting on her knees. Her eyes stayed soft, not pitying, steady. She did not look at his claws or his teeth. She looked at his face, the way his jaw quivered, the way his lower lip trembled once before he bit it. Rowan took one small step toward her. Then another. The half-shift clung to him like a second skin. His claws clicked faintly on the floor. His eyes glowed in the dim room, two golden lanterns. His breathing sounded louder to her now, or maybe it only felt that way because it was moving toward her, carrying his scent, fear, young wolf, and something sharp like broken glass. He did not rush. He crept. Not like a hunter stalking prey. More like a pup creeping closer to a fire it did not trust yet, afraid it might burn but too cold to stay away. The line scratched into the stone lay between them. Arya watched him approach it and felt the iron around her wrists tighten, as if it knew the rule better than she did. Her body wanted to lean forward, to break the circle, to meet him halfway. But she held herself still. The circle was hers, not his. The rule was hers to obey, not his burden to carry. Rowan reached the edge of the mark and stopped. He stared down at it, chest rising and falling fast again. Sweat slid down the side of his face. His glowing eyes reflected the thin, scratched line like a tiny silver river. His wolf bristled at any boundary, even a shallow one. His boy remembered orders, punishments, the weight of his father's gaze. Both tugged at him in different directions. Arya let her voice soften. The chant dipped into its quietest part, the turn where the melody curled in on itself, like a hand closing gently around a wounded paw. Her throat vibrated with the hum. Her arms ached with the urge to open wider. Very slowly, Rowan lowered himself to his knees just outside the line. His claws scraped the stone. His breath puffed out in small, sharp bursts. For a moment, he looked lost again, caught between wanting to bolt and wanting to stay. Then, with a tiny, shaky movement, he crawled forward the last bit. He did not cross the circle. He leaned over it. He reached out with both hands, claws retracted now by sheer effort, fingers shaking. He did not touch her arms, did not grab her clothes. Instead, he bowed his head and lowered his forehead until it hovered over her open palms. Aria's breath caught. For a heartbeat, he hesitated there, not quite touching. Then he let his weight settle, pressing the warm weight of his forehead into her hands. The gesture was instinct, older than words. A pup pressing its head into the safe place it knew, asking without asking, "Hold me. Tell me the world will not end tonight." Aria's fingers curled, not quite closing, cupping his head gently. Heat poured off him, the kind that came from half-shifts and nightmares. His hair was damp. His skin under it shook with tiny tremors. She felt the hammering of his pulse against her palms. She could almost feel the fight inside him, wolf and boy pushing at each other, both exhausted. She did not stroke his hair. She did not pull him closer. She kept her hands steady, a warm, solid place for him to lean into without pressure. The lullaby flowed softer now, the notes stretching like a quiet river. Her voice was barely more than a breath over his head. Rowan's claws dug into the floor on either side of her knees, but not in anger. It was like he was anchoring himself there, afraid he might be pulled back into the nightmare if he let go. His glowing eyes slid shut, lashes sticking to damp cheeks. His breathing slowed. 1 breath. 2. 3. The light in his eyes dimmed behind his closed lids. His teeth shortened, losing their sharp length little by little as his jaw relaxed. The tight pull of his muscles eased, smoothing out the lines of his small shoulders. The wolf, soothed by the song and the steady warmth of her palms, lay back down inside his chest with a tired huff. His body sagged forward just a little more, forehead pressing more fully into her hands. A small, broken sigh slipped out of him. Aria felt something inside her chest crack. No one had ever pressed their head into her hands like that, trusting her touch to make the shadows smaller. She had fixed bones, cleaned wounds, cooled fevers. But this was different. This was a child putting his whole shivering weight into the space she offered, without words, without promises, only need. Her own eyes stung. She blinked hard and kept singing until the melody reached its end and faded into a single long note. She held that note as his breathing evened out, then let it go, letting the quiet settle around them like a blanket. Rowan did not move. His forehead stayed in her palms. His hands, now with normal nails again, lay limp on the floor. His body's tremors faded to an occasional shiver. His chest rose and fell in slow, deep breaths that sounded almost like the sleep of a child who had finally outrun a bad dream. His scent changed too, the sharp bite of panic melting into something warmer, softer. Aria stayed still. Her back ached, her legs tingled from sitting too long, her wrists screamed from the weight and angle of the iron. She did not shift. If she moved, she might wake him. If she moved, she might break whatever delicate, invisible thing had just been woven between them. The door opened a crack. She did not hear the handle turn over the sound of Rowan's breathing, but she felt the air shift. The guards outside must have heard his earlier scream. They had called for their alpha. Cale stood in the doorway, the light from the hall framing him in a hard outline. His gaze went first to the bed. Empty. The blankets torn. Claw marks in the fabric, the wood. His whole body tensed. For a heartbeat, the wolf in him surged, ready to leap. Then his eyes found the small circle on the floor. He saw Rowan kneeling there, half-curled, head pressed into Aria's open hands, completely still except for the slow rise and fall of his back. He saw Aria, chained, inside the scratched circle, shoulders stiff, neck strained, hands held just so to cradle his son without claiming more. Time stretched thin. Cale's chest rose and fell once, sharply, as if someone had punched the air from him. In all the months since his mate's death, he had seen Rowan sleep, yes, but never like this. Never without flinching. Never without cries caught in his throat. Never without the restless twitch of a body that did not trust the peace it was given. Right now, Rowan looked peaceful. Not happy. Not safe forever. But peaceful, for this small slice of night. His brow, pressed to Arya's palms, had smoothed. His mouth had unclenched. His hands lay open, fingers slack instead of curled into fists. Chaol took one step into the room, then another, as if drawn forward despite himself. The floor creaked under his boot. Arya's head snapped up, eyes sharp with a healer's habit of waking at the smallest change. She did not pull her hands away from Rowan's forehead. Her whole body tensed, ready for anger, for blame, for some new punishment for breaking a rule she had tried to follow. Chaol's eyes met hers. They were not the empty, distant eyes of a leader now. They were a father's eyes, full of shock and something close to hunger, a starving kind of hope and a deep, burning fear. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice was low, but it carried weight. It was not a shout. Shouting would have been easier. This was worse. It was steady, controlled, the voice of someone who had decided in advance not to let his feelings show and was failing. Arya swallowed. Her throat felt scraped raw from singing. "He had a nightmare," she said quietly. He started to shift. "I stayed where you told me. I only..." "Not that." His gaze flicked to his son, then back. "What did you do to my son? Magic? Manipulation?" The last word came out sharp, like he hated the taste of it. Her hands trembled just enough that Rowan's head shifted slightly in her palms. He did not wake. Chaol's eyes tracked even that tiny movement, like a wolf watching the last piece of something precious. "No magic," Arya said, forcing the words to stay clear. "No tricks. Just the chant. The same lullaby as before. It calms the body. It slows the breath. It..." She hesitated, because the rest felt too soft and too true. "It tells the wolf he is not alone," she finished. Chaol's jaw clenched. "Words do not do this," he said, voice roughening. "Not with him. We have tried songs. Stories. Tonic. Threats. Nothing. This song is old," she said. "Older than your fortress, maybe. Older than any pack I have met. The herbs were taught with it. The breath, too. It is not a spell. It is a way." She searched for words simple enough. "A habit for the soul." He stared at her like he wanted to rip the answer out of her chest and check it for lies. "You expect me to believe," he said slowly, "that a lullaby from wandering herbalists can do what every healer here has failed to do?" Arya met his gaze. "You saw him," she said. "Believe what you like about me. But you saw him." The words hit something in him. He looked down at Rowan again. His son's cheek now rested more fully in Arya's hand. A small smudge of dried tears marked his skin. His lashes lay dark against his face. No strain twisted his features. His body lay heavy with the honest weight of sleep, not the false collapse of exhaustion. Chaol's heart clenched tight. For a moment, suspicion and gratitude fought inside him like two beasts. Suspicion had more teeth. Gratitude had deeper roots. A soft shuffle sounded from the hall. Two older wolves stood just outside the door, drawn by the earlier scream and now held there by Chaol's open stance. Their hair was streaked with gray. Their cloaks bore the marks of long service. Elders of the pack, keepers of old stories, always listening where others did not. One of them leaned closer, peering around Chaol's shoulder. Her eyes fell on Arya's face, on Rowan asleep in her hands, on the iron cuffs, on the scratched boundary. Her nostrils flared. She listened to the last faint echo of the chant still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. Her pupils shrank. "That song," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could pull them back. I have not heard that in 10 years. Kale's head turned. You know it? He asked. The elder's mouth pressed into a thin line. Her gaze moved from Arya to the boy and back again with a look that was not kind, not cruel, but wary. I know of it, she said. We all do. Or we used to. The other elder nodded, his face tight. It belonged to the wandering healers, he said slowly. The ones with no pack. They crossed borders. They traded herbs and songs. They calmed wolves others called lost. His eyes darkened. Until packs decided their ways were too strange. Too powerful. Too free. Arya's chest tightened. She remembered the hushed voices in the herbalist's hut, the way the old women would go suddenly quiet when certain stories came close. The burned camps. The reason no one visited them anymore. The way the older healers would touch the walls and murmur to them like they were graves. They were slaughtered, the elder woman said. A decade ago. Here. In the north. The last of their songs died with them. Or so we thought. Her gaze sharpened on Arya, suspicion rising like a tide. How do you sing what should not exist? Arya's hand stayed open under Rowan's head, but her shoulders went rigid. They found me as a baby, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Near a burned camp. They never said whose it was. They only said, you are ours now. 5 words. But they shifted the feeling in the room. Kale's eyes narrowed. The elders exchanged a quick look, full of old fears and older guilt. So, the male elder said softly. You carry their song. And their blood, the woman added. Kale straightened, every line of his body drawing tight again. Are you saying, he asked, that whatever she just did to my son is part of the same lore the packs once killed for? The elders did not answer right away. The woman's fingers twisted in the edge of her cloak. We called it dangerous, she said. But not because it harmed. Because it opened wounds we wanted closed. It made lone wolves remember they were not alone. It made alphas question who they owed loyalty to, their pack or something older. The man nodded. We feared them, he said. So we called their music magic. Witchcraft. Enemy work. It was easier than admitting we did not understand. The word magic hung in the air now, sticky and sour. Kale's eyes flicked back to Arya. Is that what you did? He asked. Open something in him I cannot control? Arya's throat felt tight. She could lie. She could say no, it was only a simple lullaby. But the memory of Rowan's trembling head in her hands burned too bright. She could not call that nothing. I soothed him, she said. That is all. The wolf in him is yours to train. The boy is his own. I only gave them a place to breathe for a moment. Kale's hands curled into fists at his sides. He did not like not understanding. He did not like that his son's only calm had come from hands wearing iron and a song tied to people his kind had once hunted. He did not like that his heart, despite all of this, softened every time he looked at Rowan's peacefully slack face. This could be a trick, the female elder murmured. A way to bind the prince. To bind you. To. Kale cut her off with a sharp look. Whatever it is, he said, it worked. Silence followed. The elders did not argue. They did not agree either. Unease rolled off them in waves. The woman's eyes flicked to Arya's cuffs as if wishing they were thicker. The man studied the scratched circle on the floor, as if measuring how easy it would be to turn it into a true prison. Kale stepped closer to Arya and his sleeping son. He knelt slowly, never taking his eyes off her, until he was near enough to see the red marks under the iron on her wrists, the fine tremor in her fingers from holding them in the same position too long. His son's head still rested in her hands, trusting, unaware of the sharp looks hanging over him. If you harm him, Kale said quietly, too soft for the hall but heavy enough to shake the air between them, I will end you myself. No cell. No trial. It will be fast. Arya met his gaze, fear and something fiercer burning together in her chest. If I wanted to harm him, she said, just as quiet, would not be holding his head like this. He searched her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there did not ease his suspicion, but it did not sharpen it either. It settled into something knotted and complicated, distrust tangled up with reluctant reliance. He stood, drawing himself to his full height again. To the elders, he said, without looking back, you will spread one message: the prince sleeps. That is all. They shifted, uncomfortable. And the girl? The man asked. Kale's mouth hardened. The Omega stays under watch, he said. The cuffs stay on. The circle stays on the floor. She does not leave this room without my order. She does not sing without my permission. He paused, then added, each word clear, and she keeps helping him. The elders did not like that. Their faces showed it, lines deepening, lips thinning. But they bowed their heads, bound by rank and by the sight of the Alpha's son finally resting without a fight. When they left, the room felt smaller, but clearer. Kale moved to the bed and pulled the blanket down. With surprising care, he slid his arms under his son's small body and lifted him. Rowan murmured once, head shifting slightly in Arya's hands before he slipped fully into his father's hold. For a second, his fingers caught at Arya's sleeve, clutching a fold of fabric like a child grabbing at a shirt in the dark. Then his hand fell loose again, trusting his father's arms to carry him. Kale laid him back on the bed, pulling the blanket up to his shoulders. He stood there a moment, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the smooth line of his brow, the way his mouth stayed relaxed. His throat bobbed with a swallow he did not let turn into words. Then he looked back at Arya. You will sleep, he said. You will need your voice. Arya let her hands lower slowly to her lap, the imprint of Rowan's warmth lingering on her skin. Sleep is not easy with iron, she said softly. It is not meant to be easy, he replied. But his eyes flicked to the angry red rings again, and something like regret crossed his face before he forced it away. He moved toward the door. He did not say good night. He did not thank her. He only paused with his hand on the handle and said, without turning, if he cries out again and I am not here, you sing. Whether I have given the word or not. Do you understand? Arya's chest ached. Yes, she said. He nodded once and stepped out, closing the door with a soft thud. Alone again in the dim room, Arya shifted her back against the wall and let her eyes fall shut for a moment. The iron weighed heavy. The circle on the floor stayed a thin line between safety and danger. The fortress above them still hummed with war and distrust. But a boy slept without screams. And somewhere in the dark roots of the fortress, an old song that was supposed to be dead breathed again, tying her unknown past to the fragile, risky future now wrapped around the prince. The wolf citadel clung to the cliff like it had grown from the rock itself. Sharp towers rose straight out of the stone, their tips cutting into the gray sky. Balconies and bridges clung to the sides, open to the wind that smelled of pine, snow, and the far-off crash of a river deep below. Flags snapped high above, bearing the pack's crest, a wolf's head over a crescent moon, whipping and snarling in the hard breeze. Arya stood at the base of the main stair, irons still on her wrists, chains short enough to remind her with every step who she was to them. Behind her, the old fortress where she had been locked away seemed small now, swallowed by the cliffs and the vast sky. Ahead, the citadel waited, full of voices, eyes, and rules she did not yet know. Rowan walked just ahead, close to Kale's side. He never strayed more than an arm's length from his father as they climbed. His wolf-bone dagger was gone for the moment, traded for a short training blade at his belt, but his fingers kept brushing his hip like they expected to feel bone, not metal. His eyes, darker now in the daylight, darted from balcony to balcony, counting windows, doors, exits, like someone who had learned the hard way that danger did not always knock first. Every time he glanced back, his gaze found Arya, as if checking she had not been pulled away by the wind. At the top of the stair, a wide stone courtyard opened, lined with training dummies and chalk-marked circles where warriors sparred. Beyond it, the citadel doors stood tall and thick, carved with running wolves and trees whose roots wrapped around hidden shapes, a reminder that this place was not just stone, but story. Inside, the air changed. It was warmer, but not soft. The smell of sweat, leather, steel, and herbs filled the high halls. Wolves moved everywhere, warriors in armor, messengers with scrolls, servants carrying trays. Tension clung to them like a second skin. The war with the rogues had not stayed behind at the lower fortress, it had crawled up here and made a nest in every shadow. Cale did not slow. He led them down a side passage, away from the main council hall with its heavy doors and heavier arguments. Eventually, the air cooled and sharpened with a different scent: alcohol, herbs, dried blood, and smoke. The infirmary. It was larger than the one Arya had known before, carved with tall, narrow windows that let in pale light. Rows of beds lined the walls, some empty, some holding wounded wolves with bandaged arms, splinted legs, or blood-stained shirts. Healers moved between them, carrying basins, cloths, and vials. When Arya stepped through the doorway, heads turned. Conversation stuttered, then dropped. Eyes slid from her iron cuffs to her face to the shadow of Cale behind her. Whispered words hung unspoken in the air, heavy and sharp. Cale's voice cut through them. "This is Arya," he said. "She will assist here. She remains under guard. She remains in reach of my son." His gaze swept the room, daring anyone to object outright. "Her methods are not yours. You will watch. You will judge by results, not by habit." A few wolves looked away at once, not willing to meet his eyes. Others stared harder at Arya, weighing her like meat on a scale. Some faces held open dislike. A few, the ones with tired eyes and blood on their hands, watched with a different expression, something that might be close to hope, buried under caution. A man stepped forward from the far end of the room. He was tall, with sandy hair pulled back at the nape of his neck and a long scar running from his temple to his jaw, pale against his darker skin. His shoulders carried that easy-ready tension of someone who could move from calm to battle in one breath. His eyes were steady, clear gray, missing nothing. He bowed his head to Cale, brief but real. "Alpha. Lysander," Cale said. "You'll oversee her when I am not present." So this was the beta. The second. The one who kept the citadel standing when the Alpha's attention was pulled in 10 directions at once. Lysander's gaze shifted to Arya. He did not flinch at the sight of the iron, nor did he soften his stare because of it. He looked at her like she was a puzzle placed in front of him at the worst possible time. His eyes stayed on her face long enough to show he cared what he found there. Then he nodded once. "I'll watch," he said. "And I'll report." Cale accepted that with a small dip of his head. "Good." His eyes brushed across Arya, over Rowan, then back to the room. "There are too many wounded for pride," he added, voice carrying to every corner. "If her herbs help, use them. If they harm, she's gone." He left then, duty pulling him toward the council chambers, where maps and arguments waited. Rowan hesitated. His small hand brushed against Arya's sleeve as if by accident. His fingers curled for a heartbeat, catching a fold of fabric. When she glanced down, his eyes flashed up to hers, dark and guarded. He did not say anything. He only released the fabric and slipped after his father, shoulders set. The door shut behind them. The infirmary felt different without Cale's heavy presence. Lighter in some ways. More dangerous in others. Lysander broke the silence. "All right," he said, voice even. "If you're here, you work. What can you do that my healers can't?" Arya's shoulders straightened. She looked past him at the wounded. One young warrior lay with a deep gash along his side, the skin sewn but swollen, angry red creeping out from under the stitches. Another older wolf coughed, his breaths wet and shallow, a bowl of untouched bitter tonic beside his bed. A third had a blackened burn climbing up his arm, the flesh cracked and hard. "May I see your herbs?" she asked. One of the healers, an older woman with tight lips and tired eyes, snorted softly. "We know our herbs," she said. "What, you think your outsider weeds are better than ours?" Arya met her gaze, calm. "I think mine are different," she said. "Different might help where same has failed." Lysander watched the exchange closely. "Show her," he told the woman. She hesitated, then gestured stiffly toward a long table lined with jars, bundles, and bowls. The sharp smell of dried plants rose as Arya approached. She ran her eyes over the familiar ones: comfrey, yarrow, willow bark, and the wrong ways they were sometimes combined. She moved her hands over the table, fingers hovering above jars without touching, feeling for what was missing. "There," she said at last, pointing to a dusty bundle shoved to the back. "Moon moss. Why is it so dry?" The older healer shrugged. "It clumps. It's bitter. And it's rare. We save it for poison." Arya shook her head. "It pulls fever from deep places," she said. "But not when it's dried to dust. It needs to be used fresh, warmed in steam, not crushed in wine." Lysander's eyes narrowed slightly, thinking. "How?" he asked. "Let me show you," she answered. He nodded to a young apprentice. "Go. Get fresh moon moss if there's any left on the north wall." The girl darted out. While they waited, Arya moved from bed to bed, asking few questions, letting her hands hover over wounds without touching. She smelled the old tonics, tasted a drop on her tongue, feeling the weight of wrong balances: too much bitter here, not enough cooling there. She suggested small changes at first, shifting doses, adding a leaf, removing a root. Some wolves grumbled but let her. Others refused to let her near, turning their faces away. Lysander watched everything. He noted who she helped and how. How she paused before speaking, as if checking each word. How she never crossed an invisible line close to the door, staying within easy reach of the guards. How her eyes softened when she saw pain, in a way that did not look practiced. By the end of the day, two warriors who had been lying in sweating, tense silence finally slept without tossing. The older wolf's cough loosened, the sound shifting from heavy drowning to something that might be cleared with time. The burned arms soaked in a bowl of a strange, steaming mix Arya made from fresh moon moss and crushed bark, the blackened skin turning less tight around the edges. Respect did not appear all at once. It came in small things, the way a young warrior muttered, "Thanks," without meeting her eye, the way the older healer stopped arguing quite so fast and started asking, "And for this?" under her breath, the way a guard shifted his stance so she had more light to see by. Resentment did not vanish either. Some wolves whispered when she moved past. Others watched the iron on her wrists more than they watched the herbs in her hands. Rumors stuck to her like burrs: traitor, witch, rogue lover, words thrown softly, but meant to sting. Lysander noticed who spoke them. At night, the citadel changed. The wind outside howled around the towers, slipping through cracks in stone. The river below roared louder in the dark, as if the absence of light gave it leave to raise its voice. Torches burned lower in the halls, their flames small and fierce. Arya walked the quiet corridor from the infirmary to the small room where they kept her at night, a space just off Rowan's new chamber area, close enough that if he cried out, she could hear. Guards walked behind her, boots soft on the smooth stone. As she moved, something on the wall caught her eye. At first, she thought it was just another crack in the old stone. But when she looked closer, she saw it was a mark. A gouge. Four deep lines carved into the wall, spaced wide apart, as if made by claws too big for any wolf she had ever seen. She stopped. The guards tensed. "Keep moving," one said. Arya lifted her hands slightly, chains rattling. "Those marks," she said, nodding toward the wall. "They are not from training." The younger guard, barely older than Rowan, swallowed. "You don't need to worry about those," he muttered. "Just keep walking." But later, she saw more. In a narrow side passage where few people walked, hidden behind a row of old shields, another set, long, deep claw marks, high up near the ceiling, as if something tall and twisted had tried to climb its way out of the stone. Near the training yard, half covered by new plaster, a curved scrape that had not fully been erased. The citadel carried scratches under its skin. At night, when everything was quieter, a sound rose that did not belong to any natural wolf. It started low, almost a growl, then thinned out into a long, hollow howl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wound through the halls, slipping under doors, crawling into ears and bones. It did not swell and fall like a normal call. It carved. The first time Arya heard it, she woke with her heart hammering and her hands pressed to her ears. The sound went straight into her chest, stirring old, cold memories she had never learned the words for. Something burned at the back of her eyes. Her wolf shivered hard, wanting to hide and listen at the same time. Across the wall, in the adjoining room, Rowan cried out. Not a nightmare scream this time. A sharp, startled sound, then a harsh, broken sob that cut off quick, like he had slapped his own mouth from the inside. She heard the scuffle of small feet on stone, the thud of a body hitting the wall, the small, hurt noise of someone trying not to make more noise. The howl outside faded. Rowan's soft, scraped breaths on the other side of the wall did not. Days folded into each other. Arya worked in the infirmary. She watched warriors come and go, some returning from the lower fortress with new wounds, others leaving with bandages wrapped tight and grim determination in their eyes. She learned the faces of those who tried to pretend they were not in pain and the ones who did not bother. Lysander watched her still. One evening, as she cleaned dried blood from her fingers over a basin, she caught voices around the corner. Two warriors spoke in low, frightened tones. Saw the marks near the west tower, one whispered. Too high for a normal wolf. Shut up, the other hissed. You want the beta to hear? You know what they say. I know what I heard, the first insisted. The hollow wolf. My uncle told me stories. Said it was a mistake from the old Luna's work. Part beast, part shadow. No pack. No mind. Stories, the second snapped, but his voice shook. Luna's dead. So is whatever she made. Then what's howling at night? Their words slid into Arya's ears like thin knives. Hollow wolf. The name sat heavy on her tongue, tasting of fear and old secrets. Every time the strange howl rose after that, she heard it under the sound, the shape of something wrong, something that did not belong to life or to death. In the training yard one cold morning, the wind whipping dirt into small spirals, Arya walked with a tray of fresh salves for bruised warriors. The yard stood on a wide ledge cut into the cliff, ringed with wooden dummies and target posts. Something white snagged on a broken post near the edge. It was small, fluttering in the wind like a trapped bird. She set the tray down and stepped closer. Her cuffs clinked softly. The guards at the gate watched but did not stop her. The post was well within her allowed space. The fabric was torn, once fine, now frayed. She pinched it between her fingers, lifting it. It looked like part of a sleeve, pale and thin, lined with faint, curling embroidery in silver thread. The pattern was worn, but she knew the kind of careful hand that had sewn it, someone who had once had time and patience for beauty. A scent rose from it when she brought it close. Old, almost gone, but not yet washed fully away by wind and time. Wolf. Female. Strong. Wrapped in something sharp and strange, like metal and moonlight and herbs pressed too hard in a mortar. Arya had never met the Luna. But she had heard stories, her calm, her sharp mind, the way her presence filled a room without raising her voice. The way her scent had mixed with the citadel's stone until some said you could tell if she was near without seeing her. This ghost of smell on the torn cloth matched those stories. Her fingers tightened. The wind tugged at the fabric like it wanted to steal it from her. She closed her hand around it and slipped it inside her sleeve, against the skin of her wrist, hidden by iron. It burned there, not hot, but too present to ignore. That night, she did not sleep. She sat with her back to the wall between her and Rowan, feeling the faint vibration every time he shifted. Outside, the strange howl rose again, thin and haunting. Under it, a second sound, if she listened very hard, a faint echo, like a woman's voice twisted through stone. The next day, Lysander found her alone by the herb racks, hands hovering over jars. His face was set more tightly than usual. "Walk with me," he said. She lifted her cuffs. "These do not go far." His mouth twitched, almost a humorless smile. "You don't need to go far." He led her to a small room off the side of the infirmary, used more for storage than anything else. Shelves lined the walls, full of old ledgers and rolls of bandage. He closed the door behind them, leaving the noise of the main room muffled. For a moment, he just watched her. "You've noticed the marks," he said at last. Arya did not pretend otherwise. "Yes." "And the howls?" "Yes." He studied her face, weighing her reaction, then looked away, jaw tightening. "There are things the Citadel doesn't like to say out loud," he began. "But your presence has already pulled up more than enough ghosts. One more truth won't drown us." She waited. "The Luna vanished," he said, "the same night something else escaped." Arya's heart kicked. "An experiment," he went on. "A forbidden one." She was clever. Too clever. She thought she could make something that would protect the pack from any rogue. A creature that could tear enemies apart without mercy but answer only to her voice. Arya thought of the claw marks in the stone. The hollow howl. The torn fabric with her scent. "It broke loose," Lysander said quietly. "No one saw it clearly. Only shadows and teeth. When the screaming stopped, the Luna was gone. The thing was gone. The boy," his throat worked. "The boy survived. Covered in blood that wasn't his." After that, he never spoke. Rowan, standing small in a room full of too much noise, seeing something no child should. Lysander met her gaze again. "We've called it a beast. A mistake. A ghost story to scare young warriors into staying close to the walls. We call it the hollow wolf now, because when it howls, it sounds like something missing its own heart." Arya thought of the way Rowan shook when the sound rose. "You think he remembers," she said. "Some part of him," Lysander answered. "Even if his words are locked away. Even if his mind has wrapped the memory in chains. When you sang, in the cell, something shook loose. He knew that chant. Or the one who raised him did." "His mother," Arya said softly. Lysander nodded. "The Luna came from far away. She brought strange herbs. Strange ways. Strange songs. Some elders hated her for it." His eyes sharpened. "The elders recognized your chant. That's no small thing." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I don't trust many people," he said. "I trust even fewer with Rowan. But he has already chosen you, whether we like it or not. He puts his head in your hands. He sleeps when you sing. He looks at you when the howls rise." A muscle jumped in his jaw. This was not easy for him. "So I'm asking," he went on. "Not as Kale's second. As someone who's watched that boy bleed inside for years." He took a slow breath. "Help us open what he buried. Carefully. Piece by piece. Whatever you are, her blood, her echo, her mistake, you might be the only one who can reach him without breaking him." Arya's wrists felt suddenly heavier. "You want me to dig in his pain," she said. "On purpose." "I want you to keep him from shattering when the past comes for him," Lysander corrected. "The hollow wolf isn't just scratching at our walls. It's scratching at his mind. If we don't know what he saw, what it is, we can't stop it." Silence sat between them, full and thick. Arya thought of Rowan's forehead in her hands. His glowing eyes dimming at her song. The way his fingers had grabbed her sleeve without knowing. The torn fabric against her wrist, his mother's faint scent clinging to it still. If I do this, she said, you will not use him like a tool. Not as bait. Not as a key to chain his own mother. Lysander's eyes flashed with something like anger at the thought. He is not a weapon, he said. He is a child. If anyone tries to use him that way, they answer to me. A pause. And to Kale. She searched his face for lies. She found none she could see. Then I will try, she said simply. He nodded once, sharp, like a vow sealed. Do it quietly, he added. In small ways. During training. During meals. When he reaches for you. No one needs to know yet what you're looking for, or why. When they stepped back out into the main room, the citadel looked the same. But a new thread ran under everything now, tying Arya and Rowan to something larger, older, and more dangerous than either of them had asked for. The first test came sooner than anyone expected. The great hall filled that night with warriors, elders, and visiting allies. Torches burned bright, throwing light on stone banners and long tables. The air buzzed with tired talk, heavy with the smell of meat, sweat, and worry. Arya stood near a pillar, just inside her allowed space, iron catching the firelight. Some wolves kept their backs turned to her. Others watched her from the corner of their eyes, like someone waiting for a pot to boil over. Rowan sat near the high table beside his father, shoulders stiff under too formal clothes. Women from the pack hovered a few steps away, whispering to each other, eyes sharp as knives. Some of them had scars on their arms, the marks of his old attacks. Their gazes slid from him to Arya and back, thin with blame. A snide voice rose from the cluster of females, not as quiet as it should have been. Look at her, one said. Iron on her wrists and yet she walks where the prince does. Maybe they plan to chain them together, another murmured. One cursed blood to match the other. Rowan's fingers tightened around his cup. He heard more than most people thought. He understood more than his silence suggested. The words pricked at him, small, mean needles. They did not touch his father. They did not dare. They touched the woman who had sung him out of the dark. Something snapped. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. The hall went quiet. All eyes turned to him. Rowan's chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. His jaw clenched. The air around him thickened, that charged feeling Arya knew from his nightmares. His eyes flared, gold burning out from the center. His hands curled at his sides, nails lengthening into claws with a soft, sick sound. Half shift. He did it without screaming this time. Without falling. He stepped down from the dais, bare feet light on the stone. Wolves backed out of his path without choosing to, their bodies remembering the bite of his rage. The women who had spoken of Arya shrank back, but did not move away far enough. Pride pinned them in place. Rowan stopped in front of them. His lips peeled away from his teeth, showing sharp edges. A low, rumbling snarl tore from his chest, not the wild, broken sound of a nightmare, but something more controlled, more dangerous. His glowing eyes cut from one face to the other, and then beyond them, to Arya by the pillar. It was a test. He did not know that word. But his body knew the shape of it. He wanted to see, would she stand with him when all these eyes watched? Would she reach for him, or would she shrink like the others? Arya's heart slammed. Every rule pulled at her, stay in your place, do nothing unless ordered, do not touch him in public. Every instinct in her chest screamed the opposite, go to him, soothe him, keep him from turning that hurt into something he could not come back from. Her hands shook. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward until the end of her chain tugged against her wrists. The iron bit deep. The sound of it scraping over the stone was small but clear in the quiet hall. Rowan, she said softly. His head snapped toward her. Gold eyes met hers, burning bright. His snarl faltered, just a fraction. The room held its breath. Arya lifted one cuffed hand. It trembled in the air between them, fingers spread, reaching not to command, not to drag him, but to offer. Her hand stopped inches from his cheek, waiting. Every eye in the hall tracked that shaking hand. For a moment, the boy stood there, halfway between rage and choice. Then, like in the dark room when no one watched, he leaned in. Very slowly, ignoring every shocked gasp, every stiffened back, he pressed his half-shifted cheek into her palm. The warmth of his skin burned against her cool fingers. A rumble came from his chest again, but this time it was softer, lower, a sound closer to a pup's rough, clumsy purr when it found a safe place under its mother's chin. The women who had mocked her fell silent, color draining from their faces. All around, wolves stared, their world tilting. The prince, who had clawed every woman who came near since his mother vanished, now leaned into the touch of a prisoner in irons. Not grudgingly. Not by force. Willingly. Cale's hand, halfway to Rowan's shoulder from across the hall, froze in the air. Relief punched through him so hard it made his ribs ache. His son was not attacking. His son had found a way to stand in his wolf without biting. But braided tight with that relief came fear, sharp and cold. Because the anchor Rowan had chosen, here in front of everyone, was a girl whose past tied to forbidden songs and a creature that haunted their walls. Gasps and murmurs rose. Did you see? He let her. He purred. A woman. He. Lysander's eyes met Cale's across the room, questions and warnings flashing between them. This changed things. Not in some distant, slow way, but right now, in this hall, in the minds of every wolf who watched. Rowan stayed there, cheek pressed into Arya's shaking hand, until his breathing calmed and the light in his eyes dimmed back to a deep, steady glow. Only then did he step back, claws retracting, shoulders lowering. He did not look at the women again. He turned and walked back to his place beside his father, but when he sat, his eyes searched the hall until they found Arya again, as if to check she was still there, still real. Cale's fingers curled tight around the arm of his chair. His son was smiling, just a little, the barest curve at the corner of his mouth. It was small. It was everything. It terrified him. Because with every new bond between prince and prisoner, the line between danger and salvation blurred more. And somewhere, in the deep stone under their feet, something that howled like a hollow thing listened, waiting for its own name to be called.